Well, good evening. Glad you could all join me here today. As you can tell, I have a little bit of a cold. I don't normally sound like this. Too bad. But I'm using it to my advantage.
Yes, it is a mandate cold.
That's right. That's right. We're a man likes a sheep. Nobody cares. Welcome to more so than usual. Welcome to the September Omaha Linux Users Group meeting. I'm John Larson, the system engineer, or Larson, systems engineer at AIM. Sorry, losing track. It's been a long day for me in class this morning. I was about 5. So, this month, Aaron's going to talk about Docker. I'm going to be excited because really no one is.
Don't you have all those announcements and stuff? You normally do Fedora,
I do all those announcements.
Really?
Well, there's track of any of that stuff.
So is our developer conference still accepting?
Yes. No, our developer conference is not.
So Barcamp's Friday.
Barcamp is on Friday.
And Saturday.
And Saturday. Our developer conference is the next 3 days, and it's Friday. On Saturday, September 13th, is the Omaha Mini Maker Fair.
Watch for coverage on half a day because they're sending somebody to tour our schools.
Oh, that's great. Yes. I don't know if my friend got hold of you about his talk.
Yeah, I listen to each other and I need to talk to them tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm trying to talk to them.
Right. It would be very short. It would probably be 20 minutes.
Actually, I asked them if what's the setup of space.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to make it. So what was the mission, the cost of getting
The cost of admission is the cost for getting it on one children's museum. The Maker Fair itself has no additional cost for that admission. $300,000 per person.
Wow.
And that's for great turnout. This is where I emphasize that this is not a children's activity.
This is an all ages activity.
This is an all ages activity. And though for some reason we're not allowed to have brewers there.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, maybe we should have set something up in our parking lot.
Yeah, I'll get you and Eric Kaplan together.
Actually, that would be conflict with the bar. That would be, and then we would have to have a liquor license. So probably not for the
Anyway, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please come by. Sweet, cool stuff.
What's the most recent kernel? 6.15.
I've got to get those.
15.
You just did.
I saw RC17 was almost.
You just did. I think you just released the 17 because you just did the 25th anniversary of Linux kernel.
Oh, okay.
Original email out from
91.
Compost Linux. So that was just last week. They were using Tails.
Latest stable is 3.16.1.
Did they using Tails?
What's Tails?
Tails is the amnesiac incognito live stream.
The anonymous distribution.
Yes.
It's so conspiracy.
Richard sounds fair. Mainly is put using ITP in there and upgrade as soon as possible. It hasn't broken. Like after 8 weeks guarantee.
Oh dear.
Oh, yes. Well, no, the 4 is still working fine. She's going to be using the other stuff now.
Okay. I heard from a classmate this morning that works at Best Buy in the Geeks Closet, that they've been getting a lot of Lenovo's in recently. Apparently there's a browser component that's being exploited and controlled on all installed Lenovo equipment.
It ships with the laptop.
And so it ships with the laptop.
Lovely.
It's a browser protection extension. Some conduit thing. So that, he said that they have remarkably a lot of them in the last 3 days.
Just laptops or? I'm still don't know what that's.
I don't know if Lenovo does desktops for consumers. I think it's mostly businesses that do desktops. So you got those idea pads and idea, that's the consumer end. So watch out that space. Oh, Chrome 37 came out.
And you get
Those people can get 64-bit.
you still use all your available memory that you want to.
We'll get too far over rubber, and that's just. You're right. So,
Stuff happens.
yes. Are you speaking of marketing?
No. I don't know. That's really about marketing, it's marketing organized.
It's not really a selling point to you.
It depends on the quality, depends on the quality of people there. But there will be a bunch of people who are convinced that they are the next company or something because they've got an idea that's just like this or just like that. It's like, why would I use yours then? It's interesting, so. $15 is a direct ticket. Just order something expensive, trying to see what the cap is. You know, my head. Yeah. Can't make it match. All right. Well, so how many people use Docker? What? How have you used Docker? So my lab is in PC.
Just a little bit, not a whole lot.
So what is Docker? Let's start with that. Docker, pretty much new way to deploy software. It uses containers for this. Combines with Docker repositories, and it is a paradigm shift. I normally don't tend to hype stuff too much, but this is actually really cool. This is something that could change things. Very rarely you see something you go like, you saw virtualization, you saw basics just from Red Hat first started coming out, giving you Mandrake came out, KD desktop, things like that. Docker has potential to be that kind of thing. It has what equivalent to be the equivalent of things like OpenStack, because it is a very cool piece of software. And it is really hot right now. Everybody is getting on the Docker bandwagon. If anybody can't hear me, let me know. I don't know what the acoustics are like here. If you have any questions, ask me anytime throughout. Keep in mind, my Docker is like this much. My exposure to Docker is like this much. So I might say that's something I don't know, and I won't be lying. So let's talk about Docker versus VMs. And a virtual machine is pretty much where you take your machine and partition up into smaller machines. What you have to do here is you have to set aside a certain amount of disk, a certain amount of memory. You can do things with smart copies, copy write files, stuff like that to try and help out and stuff like that. But you're still taking parts of your big machine and divvying them out and setting it aside pretty much primarily for that. So what Docker does is pretty much any instance to see all the memory, all the network, all the capabilities of the underlying machine. You can actually have it have its own file systems. You can mount local file systems. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. But it comes down to it's a lot more efficient way of running it. You can run a lot more Docker instances than you can run VMs because you're not running a separate kernel for it. You're not running separate device drivers. It doesn't use those capabilities. It uses the capabilities of C groups and Linux containers to handle its stuff. So it does it all through just higher-level software. It's kind of like if you've used Chroot in the past, this is super Chroot. This is super J. This is just a way of doing it at a software level. But it can actually handle things pretty cool. You can pull a, be running, like right now I'm running Linux Mint, you can pull a CentOS user space on top of it. You can pull a Slackware user space on top of it.
OLUG.
Yes, except for the kernel. The kernel you will not be running.
Can't do the kernel.
You can't do the kernel. You can. There's supposed to be some ways to flip stuff in and out, but no one's. If you run it,
Then you that functionality, just use
yeah. Well, either that or else you can run. You can always do UML if you really want, and do user mode Linux, and then just actually run the kernel as a process on HCM. But it's very, very cool stuff. One thing to keep in mind, Docker instances are not as secure as VM instances. They're not as secure as Chroot. They're not as secure as Jail. because you're relying on C groups to handle all the stuff. And the namespaces are not straightened out all the way at the network level. What this means is you have root on this. Inside the Docker instance, you can break out your root in the main box by using the namespaces inside the kernel, inside the networking stack. So some people are trying to suggest that for running code you're not sure about, potentially malicious code, stuff like that. No, not yet. You still want to use VMware, you want to use QEMU, you want to use something different that actually has real partitioning and stuff like that in it. Now, the one thing I did mention here is, since it is using the underlying machine more, you don't pay some of the penalties, like the double write penalty, which right now, if you actually write to, under VirtualBox, if you write a file under the VirtualBox instance, write into the local machine, the VMware instance, the VirtualBox instance, then you write into the real hardware, so you're sometimes paying a double. They've made some enhancements on that, but still there's some drawbacks on that, unless you're using the DES. Docker versus LXC. Docker is close to LXC, now runs and uses some parts of it.
What is LXC?
Linux containers. It's another way you can actually take running Linux instance and split it up into separate machines. It's been around for a while. It's lightweight virtualization. It's been pretty popular for a few years amongst some nerds and stuff. What really makes Docker unique versus most of the other ones is it's got a whole ecosystem built around it. Docker repos, tools, documentation, examples, all the stuff you need to actually see what it does. Is Docker right for X? Right now, Docker still they put it up to 1.2 recently, but that's a really soft 1.2. And I would say it's ready for test dev. I don't know if I run production stuff in it. A company I know in town that I sometimes spend time at during the day is actually looking to run some production stuff on Docker. They've done a lot of evaluation of it. It's just the ability to deploy the stuff is really, really nice. So it's got some capabilities that are very cool. The way it does deployments for test dev, it is amazing. For DR, it is amazing. For that kind of stuff, it is truly astonishing. For production, I'm still, of course, I was also laying out a whole VMware running virtual running production as well. So I'm a little more cautious in that respect. So one thing that Docker is really not the best for is some of the stuff that's high CPU, high network stuff. It may not be the best match. It might be better off running real hardware again, kind of stuff. But once again, it is amazing to test it. Let's go through the basic Docker tutorial. You can go out to docker.com/try it. Anybody can go hit this. Provide a really high level intro to Docker. So, ooh, that looks bad.
You can mark the colors in your It's just what they're providing.
Yes, sir.
Can you lower the resolution?
Force content.
You got a brightness output down there?
Let's see this for a second.
Reader's Digest. Or just type it.
It's I can. Okay.
Hard for the folks at home.
Yes. Well, you can follow along with it at Docker.
Oh yeah, let's go to the website.
Yeah. So we're going to start with the basics. So one nice thing about this is it's all emulating it out, but it does a pretty good job. So just to give you a Docker PS, all the commands, by the way, are called Docker space something. If you're one of those poor unfortunates who runs Ubuntu, it's not Docker, it's docker.io. Because there was an old package in X11 called Docker, which was a stupid package for just attaching stuff to Windows. It just, they won't get rid of that. So once you actually install this on Ubuntu, it'll be Docker.io, which if you do that, the first thing to do is link Docker, user bin Docker to user bin Docker.io, and your life will be a lot simpler. Because that is going to be one thing. The other thing it's going to bite you is almost all the examples, very few are an upstart and stuff, so that's always kind of a pain in the butt. So we'll start out with the basics. Their suggestion is to start out by seeing what version of Docker is running. Say, so they're running version 0.13, the Docker emulator version, which is a bit old.
Karen, don't you have a brightness?
Nope, this is maxed. Fortunately. Get you right.
It would be the projector.
Yeah. Good for it.
Is there any way you could have like a white background and black text?
Nope, not in this.
That's their website design.
It's all straight from them. This is actually just running inside their window.
Shame on them.
So let's do a quick.
Like on my laptop, to VGA, right?
The quick example of how much you find out which things are available is you do a Docker search. This is like a Docker search for Ubuntu. There's a whole bunch of different ones here, like 1204 SSH, 1210 SSH. People put their own individual versions out there, all sorts of stuff like that. But we're going to do Docker search tutorial. And we found it. So now that we found it, we need to install it, and that's called a Docker pull, which this is where things get kind of interesting. What it's doing here is pulling multiple layers. Each one of these is part of the file system, and other stuff is layered on top of it. So there's a base part of Ubuntu, there's another set, there's all this kind of stuff. What really is interesting is you can take your version and turn it back in through commit as another set of abstraction, another extension to it. So when you make your changes to it, it'll actually put it out there, publish it, and make it available. You can either make it available to everyone in the whole world, or you can make it available to just yourself to people you know through a private repository. Another option is you can run your own repository, which if you try and run a repository is a pain in the ass to get set up. So the best way to run a repository is to run a repository inside Docker. But once you do that, it's actually pretty simple. It's just Docker run. It pulls it down for you and it goes from there. So we've downloaded the image now. We have a local image. So let's run it real quick. So what we did there is we started up the Docker instance, we pulled down the Learn tutorial, we gave it a command to run, echo hello world, it ran that, then it completed. So the instance started, ran its command, and then it went away. So it just handled it, boom, 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 very simply straightforward. What we're going to do next is we're going to install some software. The example they want us to install here is ping, and you can do that as well. So what we've done is now we have it downloaded for us. We have it, it's pulled down that package inside the Docker instance, completed it, and dropped this back out. So now we're back at our command line in our root machine. And if we do docker ps-shell, it'll show us we have created our own container with the ID 698 running Ubuntu 1204, which the last command we do is apt-get install ping. So it exited cleanly, everything is there. We now have our own version of Ubuntu with ping installed. Now, this is one of the very important things to know about Docker, is you can shorten the container name as long as it's unique. As long as you have only 1698 or one da 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 da, you can just type the first couple characters and it'll be smart to figure that out. Because these of course are pretty horrible IDs. They're designed, of course, to be unique. So if we commit this, what we've done now is we have created a new one that has ping as part of it. That has been committed to the Docker repository now. So if other people want to pull this, they can pull Docker pull learn ping. They can actually have their own copy of it. So if we put any software we want into in there, we can pretty much do rematch our own version of Ubuntu if we want to. And you can put anything, any change you want in there, any files you want in there, anything you do in there, your entire everything, all the components you want in there, check it in, and then other people can pull it. So anybody can pull it anywhere in the world, provided they have access to the repositories. Because right now there's pretty much two major repositories. There's Docker.io, which has its own repository system, which they have their free versions, and they also have the paid versions. So you have your own private repository. You want to make sure that no one else in the world can see. You can do that. There's also Quake, which is another one, QUAY, which has its own repository, which offers similar plans, stuff like that. Also very cool stuff. They have a bunch of examples out there you can pull, modify, and play with. There's also, you can run your own repository, which is the way a lot of people are doing as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run a ping against Google.com. So what we've done now is we've installed the ping, we've run the ping, it's actually running ping right now. So we now have it running. So if one thing to keep in mind is if you have a command that keeps running, it will keep running it forever until you control C.
So I'm assuming you can use this for like programs that have an actual graphical interface, not just command line stuff.
It's designed primarily for servers.
No.
If you want to run something like that on it, you can tunnel to the SSH-X on it, but it's not designed for running GUI applications. This is going to change the way servers work, not the way the desktop works. I mean, the possibility exists it could do it, but no one's really doing that right now. This is totally for servers.
Okay, well,
Can you migrate a container or a job from a container?
Yes.
Or container dies?
You don't have live migrations. That is not in the cards yet. They're still working towards that. What you can do is you can actually set up something up. You can export a container. Like I could do a Docker export this container to a name, pull it all this stuff into a file, which is the entire GZ file. Then I can move it to another machine, and then I can import it on that machine and be able to run it there. So if we do that, I can run it for you. And this is doing a push of taking the last version we had.
Is that the fail whale?
No, it's the Docker whale, a success. I'll run that command again. What it's doing is it's pushing just the 4 parts it needs. Push the tags. So what we did here was we just fired up, just ran a simple basic one, a couple commands inside it, just run from there. That's interesting, but it's not really what we're here. That's the one I'm more interested in. Oh. So I've got a Docker on this machine in both the core machine and inside of VM as well. I've got VM power on, back on. One of the most important things to know is Turnkey Linux is doing all their application, all their image appliances as Docker images as well, which is amazingly nice. So, let's see what I got running right now. Right now I have one image running outside my base machine, and that is actually the Docker repository for the registry so I can check stuff into it right now. It's giving me some grief, so we're not going to show that part as much. But let's do a Docker pull. Since it already has it downloaded, it's just going to speed like boom, there it comes back. So let's do a run it. Dash I interactive. One thing to keep in mind is that this port thing is really important because that's the only way you can map ports between your Docker instances and your base machine. The way it works right now is you can take any port you want to that's exposed by that machine and pull it out as a local thing, a local item. You don't necessarily have to do that, but you're going to want to do that. I'll tell you why here. Because I can fire this stuff without exposing that port. Then I can fire the machine, do a Docker inspect against IP address, which will be a private IP address, like usually 172 or something like that, 10 dot. It's random, which is just great. And I just do an IP tables and just route the traffic to it. And that will work until the next time I reboot it, restart it, and it gets a new private IP address. And that will then proceed to be a pain in the butt. Because the way it boots, it won't necessarily give it to you right away. Oh no, it may not happen until it needs it. So you're into this non-deterministic quagmire of, well, it's painful. So the important thing is, figure out the port you want when you run it, or else your life is going to suck a lot. They are working and enhancing this in later versions of Docker. And it's going to be taken care of in probably 1.13, 1.4.2.0. And when that happens, it is going to be a great day because I will have one less thing to bitch about in my life.
You'll find something else.
Yeah, there's something else to fill. The void will be filled. But, so let me fire it up. So now we got it up and running. Now let me do a Docker attach. Let me do a Docker yes real quick. Make sure I get the right one. So now I have one running at 26272 da da da. Now I'm going to do a Docker attach. This will attach to it at the portal. And it shows you what it's doing. Right now, it's pulling down all the security patches because that's what Turnkey Linux does for you. So, come on.
So this Docker doesn't support bridging?
It does. It uses its own bridge right now. You can add some stuff to it, but it's really kind of funky right now. The networking, I've had some, it doesn't seem to happen in the time frame you expect it to happen. If I do, let's pop over real quick. If I do
Is it less secure to do the bridging? Is that another reason?
this is not secure at the network level at a real time situation. You're not going to want to be running multiple users on this right now, you know, that are complementary. Because right now it does create Docker 0, which is its own virtual interface, which has a private IP address, broadcast, all that stuff set up. And it's still going.
Do you have any passwords? interfaces file? Can we look at your Etsy network interfaces file?
Can we look at what though? I think it only creates it when Docker's actually running. Let's just put it right now. Maybe I should have told to skip security updates. You normally won't run into this. The only reason this happens is because the way Turnkey Linux does their stuff. How many people know what Turnkey Linux is? Turnkey Linux is this amazing repository of images that are ready to go for various things. They're all based on Debian nowadays. Let's say you need an image that does. I'm putting a lamp on here right now. Let's say you want one that does. Yeah, you want Google's App Engine, Python SDK file deployment. You can grab that in a variety of ways. You can grab it as a VM, an ISO, OpenStack, OpenZ, da. It's also available through Turnkey, through Docker as well now. The way these guys tend to make money is they have a really good business plan too. Is you can deploy this to the EC2. And they actually have a backup appliance. They have it allows you to back configuration, all your changes, all your stuff, and it uses their Amazon infrastructure for that, so they get a couple cents off to turn it on the top. So it works pretty well for them. Come on. Yes.
In the dev channel.
What?
That's why there's so many updates.
It's because this is 13.0, so this has been updated for a while. This is straight up easy. I should have grabbed this prior to this. I didn't realize it would be this big again.
So this is like 4 versions old of Linux, man.
What?
No, the
It's
Docker
easy.
images work.
The Docker stuff I'm using, that's where things get interesting. The Docker I'm running on this machine right now is 1.2, because Linux Mint can actually choose the upstream Docker version. If I run Ubuntu, I'll get version 0.9. If I run Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, I will get about 1.0, I believe. If you choose the other one, it varies from distro to distro dramatically. A lot of people are moving to the upstream version because it tends to work a little better for them. We're so close. So close.
What version of Linux Mint is the host? Hardware, bare metal OS.
Oh,
They can just finish.
it's Linux Mint 17, I believe.
No.
The latest.
Who's behind Docker?
Docker's its own group company.
But it's a company.
Yeah. They have their own group of people behind it.
Did you, I'm sorry, did you say how they make money? You were explaining our Turnkey Linux.
Docker makes money off the repositories. You can have a public repository, which is free, freely available. If you have your company as a repository, let's say AIM Institute want to have their repository. Yep. So you can upload your own custom images to that. They charge you for space and their repos and all that kind of stuff. Which is kind of cool because you think about it. If I have, let's say, CareerLink version 13.1 or whatever version you put on there, you can upload that, pull it down anytime you want to, anywhere in the world, and deploy it. It's not through Docker images.
But what's special about the Docker image repository? Couldn't I set the same thing?
You can run your own repository.
Site or an RSync?
Yeah. You can. It's just very well laid out and designed.
Okay.
Like
Just with the dearth of free online file storage companies available, it's just interesting that that's their only business model. Do they offer like support for anything?
They do offer support for custom design too. The problem is your back situation. Are you going to run the upstream version of Docker, which is going to be under their control, or are you going to run the version with the other systems, stuff like that? You're able to go upstream, they use passport contracts, and we'll do this stuff for you, but I don't know what the pricing on that is. I think the repo is pretty much going to be their big way to do it. They raised a bunch of money. The question is, how is Docker going to make money? We all know how Docker's going to make money. They're going to get bought by something. They're going to get bought by Google. They're going to get bought by Google, or they'll get bought by Google perhaps.
What about Google?
Or Google, yes, or Google. That's also another possibility. I mean, that or Red Hat, or someone's going to buy it. That just seems pretty obvious to these guys.
But what are they buying? It's an open source software company. Who's available?
Yeah.
You just buying the people?
You're buying the repository, the knowledge, all that kind of stuff. And the generic goodwill that goes with giving a bunch of money to some guys who came with a good idea.
Yeah, we thought we were going to buy Twitch too.
Well, that's because you got outbid for Twitch. I can't believe Amazon gave that much money for it. I still don't understand. I think if I understood, I wouldn't be. I'd be paying with rich people on my station.
Instead of us elites.
I was going to kind of leave that implied, but we are almost there. We are almost there. I feel so we're so close. The worst thing is this is a demo of only one part to show how something doesn't work. That's what really is going to be the bad part about it. How long has Docker been around? It's been around for about 6 months above the ground. It's been around before that. It's been popular for a while now. People are just nuts about it.
That's pretty cool that Turkey got their stuff available.
Yes. A lot of people are doing it right now.
Are we?
I've been following it. Yeah. But I think it's been
0.6, I think.
And come on. So, yes, that's hitting the Docker instance running the same local machine. That seems like a lot for that little payoff, doesn't it? But what's interesting is it'll show this right here is where things get interesting. So if you take a look at this, it goes to HTTPS localhost 123.2.1, which is webmit's default port, which you can't see. But the important thing is that port is running. That port's available. That port can be had right now. And let's click and see what happens. This web page not available because when I created the Docker run instance, I only gave it the port for 80. How do you do this now? Well, I can do a commit, save it off, do a new run, which might be a way to do it. I can do a Docker export, do a Docker import, or I can just know what the hell I'm doing and start it up again, which is normally what I ended up doing right now.
Start what?
The Docker run with the right command line options. Because I gave it the wrong command line
ports.
Yeah. I gave it that port. So now I can do a Docker stop.
Keep thinking you say doctor. It's my hold.
So if I do a Docker stop now,
I'm hearing it.
Sorry.
now I'm starting to wonder if I'm saying it wrong. Come on. Now, if we do a Docker PS, it only shows the one running. And if I try and go back to localhost, it'll be there because I didn't refresh it. Now that refreshed, it's going to time out and give web page not available. Then if I do a Docker start again, boom. So that's how fast it starts the Docker instance. Just boom, boom, boom. That's part of where things get interesting. I can create a dozen of these Docker instances. They tend to use up very little space. I can create a lot of them. I can go out and grab the any Docker instance I want. We can do a Docker PS, Docker list, Docker search, turnkey, or a Docker search, yes. And this is all the images that Turnkey Linux has made available. Sugar, CRM, OpenPhoto, Apache Engine Java, Light HTTP GTD. Any one of these is available through a single Docker home. What?
Now, these share the same kernel on your running system, but everything else, libraries,
Yep.
devices,
Devices show up as are mapped out, so you won't necessarily get everything. You'll get
So
the
it's like a
majority of
loop.
user space.
It's like a loop.
Yeah.
okay, so again, like you said before, it's like super true.
Yeah. It is. That's what makes it very interesting. If you have stuff that's installed in the base system that uses dependencies that aren't in the base, it will handle enough of it so it can do things. Like I've run this on a minimal CentOS, and I've installed a higher level stuff on it, and it has successfully done it. So somehow it's been able to handle enough to get down to the kernel level by using the OS installed on top of it.
So you can use this to run, for example, applications that aren't necessarily supported by the underlying operating system.
Yep.
Say like you've got an old app, rather than having to run an entire, let's say I got an app that is statically linked against the glibc that came with Red Hat
Yeah.
5,
Yeah.
right? I could install that, I could set that up as a Docker with those libraries, install it, and run it, and it would work just as if it was, without me having to run a VM with an old nasty version.
Yeah. You're still going to be kind of a in-between spot on some of this components and stuff because you're looking at mismatch stuff. Because you're running the root kernel and everything else on top. So libc and stuff will be the bad version.
Oh, so it won't, okay.
It won't patch it. It will not
No, I
patch it.
understand, but it won't like, again, like with True, you can have your own lib and use your lib.
Yeah, it does have to tell you and all that stuff.
So I can do that.
Yeah. That's pretty much what it is. It does that component. You can actually see that people out here will have really old versions of Ubuntu and stuff like that. But keep in mind, you're also stuck with just the base OS and all this stuff. I mean, you can put X11 on there, and you can. We can do install XIs and connect to it, do destination tunneling stuff. But right now, this is support that. There are people who are working on that. It's a whole other deal.
Where the question is, it wasn't really designed for that. Why would you do that?
No, it's really designed to just redo servers. I mean, this is really we're going to take over servers and destroy everything else.
What about memory? As far as the server goes, how much memory is available?
All of it.
So there's no,
There's not very.
shooting going on.
The only thing you can do is you can say, well, you can do stuff through ulimit and stuff like that. You can tie it down to that. You can do that. Because right now, if I do Docker, like let's say Docker version.
Well, one of the biggest complaints a lot of people have is that you can't oversubscribe.
Well, you can. You'll be swapping like a dog. You can run enough stuff on it.
Right.
But you,
I mean, this would, in some instances,
Yeah.
this would work better.
well, since you're using the AUFS file system and stuff like that, you're actually sharing some of it, so you won't be using as much if you run the same type of applications and stuff. If you run the same image multiple times, remember utilization should be really small. So the question is how much you get out of it. Well,
Just sure.
yeah. Well, use the AUFS file system. You can also use BTRFS and stuff like that, but it just doesn't even not. One of the things that's cool about this is you can have immutable file systems underneath it. I can say file A, layer B, layer C, do not change those. If you make any changes to those, make them to the next layer on top as copy and write change them. So you can actually benefit from having the ability to do that. So you can have a base of all your stuff. Like this is the base, like we run everything on top of CentOS 6. And then everything else we put on top of that is our thin layer.
You're saying a piece of stuff.
Yep. You control what does and doesn't make it into it. It's pretty cool stuff. So why this matters? Software deployment is tough to get right. Everybody knows that. Continuous integration, all that stuff has helped a great deal. But still, the ability to take the same software you run at work, save that in, check it into a repo, hit the registry, pull your own copy of it, test it, verify it, validate it. That is very, very cool. So you can actually, if I want to, I can have it running my machine. I feel good about it. I think we've got a version. I can commit it and then check it. I can do the commit, get it checked in, then have everybody else pull it into the production environment, and they will have everything I have. They'll have the same dependencies, they'll have the same PHP files, they'll have the same everything you need to run it. There will not be a situation, well, you didn't have this, you didn't have that. No, you've got it all. You got everything, or you have nothing. And that is an amazing concept of changing. Yeah, creating more instances, very easy. One thing to keep in mind, everything in Docker you have to run right now is Grothe or sudo or however you want to. It's not designed to run stuff as the usual user. There's working towards that. There's going to be a version of Docker eventually that's going to split two components, like the way they do like SSH or stuff like that. It'll be privileged separation. And that is not very fun.
Like user spaces.
Yeah. They're going to try and split it like the new SSH stuff. That's not going to be for a while yet. Why else it matters? You can create your own Docker repo, set up an image you want to use. So if I use Ubuntu all over, I do all this kind of stuff. I can pull Docker, I can pull the image for Ubuntu, I can push it locally, and then I can have everybody locally just pull that version of it. So I don't have to go out to the outside world anymore to go get Ubuntu. I can have all have the same version. And I can make sure every machine has the same version at the moment it starts. I don't have to deal with, well, when did you patch? When did this happen? When did that happen? After you start running it, of course, that's going to happen. But at that point to start, it's an amazing concept. You can also do something called Docker conf files, where you can give like basic commands like run Docker, run this, run this, run this, run this. So you can actually have it programmatically create yourself a Docker environment. If I want to, I can have 100 Docker run files run every time this machine booted. Probably not quite that many, 4 gigs of RAM. But I can run 10 or 12, they'll run automatically, they'll pull various things down. I can have it expose these ports, do this, do that, all that kind of stuff immediately. And then every time I reboot it, I can either have it do a Docker start, which will start in a container that's already been running, or I can have it do a Docker run, which will create a new container. I can remove the old containers, I can do all that kind of stuff. So you might as well do continuous integration, you can do automated pulls from multiple systems for upgrades. Very cool way to do it.
So for some of us that are used to having a Linux server with X number of applications on it, this guy's running Apache and running SQL and FTP and R6 or whatever. Is the idea with this going forward that would instead be a base OS and then each major server application I want to run be inside a Docker?
Yeah, that's one possibility. Or you can have a situation where I have the stuff I care about in terms of Linux or whoever, and then I have my stuff on top of that as another layer. I get what I get from CentOS, I have my configuration and all that stuff there, and that's stuff on top. It's whatever, however you want to do it is about working. Do you want to run 1 million Docker instances? I don't know. It comes down to you have some benefits to it, but they're also once again being treated like separate machines. So,
right, it's not quite a bunch of VMs, but it's
yeah. But if you put about how many layers you have, so if you have like a bunch of different proxy front ends and stuff like that for load balancing, we're going to have multiple machines. We'll talk about something called CoreOS in a minute. It is going to, this is the other part of this that makes it very cool. But it comes down to, this is going to, what it can do is how you want to lay it out. In terms of containers, it's so much more lightweight. If you have a whole bunch of running things, and you can do it however you want to. But yeah, that comes down to making privilege separation, you do your own proxy and all that kind of stuff. And keep that separate from your database and do some of the features of it. Are you going to run everything separately? Not for a while yet. It's possible that you couldn't want to.
Are you limited to the line VM machine?
Well, limited to what?
Are you limited to the line VM machine running Docker?
Sorry, what was that?
Are you limited to the single IP on the machine?
Oh, yes. Well, you can.
Is there a way to bind other IPs so that you can actually get
If you have, I mean, you can register multiple IPs in the base system and then bind separate ones on that, I'm pretty sure.
but it's still doing port address?
Yeah. But you can do all that stuff going through the bridge and stuff like that. It's all available. It's just right now. That's one of the things that they're still working on. Networking is going to improve a lot. One question that I get asked: is this really new? No. With user mode Linux and the copy and write file system, you could have done a lot of stuff. How many people ran user mode Linux? Sweet. All right. User mode Linux is part of when you build the kernel. There's an option in there where it says i86, 386, 664, RPC. There's an option there called which is user mode. You can build the kernel, and what this will build is a big executable. And that executable can then be run from the command line And you can actually run Linux on top of Linux. The reason why people the reason why it was amazing is you can GDB it. You can actually figure out what's going on. And that is tremendous. And you can also, back in the day, there's this whole thing called OSZoo, which is still out there, I'm pretty sure. OSZoo.org, which had various file systems available for it. So you can run a kernel, grab a Red Hat, or grab a Gentoo, or grab whatever you want from file system, mount it up, user space, and go to town. And that's a lot of what Docker can do. What's the big difference between user mode and the Docker stuff? People like the Docker stuff. They're using it. That's really what down to. There's another project out there years ago called OpenBC. I don't know how many people know this. If you ever done with OpenBC is its own entire thing. What they do is they do the same basic thing as Docker does. They create different namespaces, type jail situations. Very cool stuff. Once again, never really took off. No one really knows why. It just wasn't the right time. If you want to use OpenBC, you can do great things. You can do everything Docker can do pretty much, except for the registry stuff. But it just didn't take off. So what is different about this time is how well supported it is. It has everything again. It has enough support behind it, it's going to take off. And it is taking off. There's just no real way around it. I think it's going to be successful. Which distro supported? Ubuntu out of the box, 14.04. Debian, it is testing, will be the next release. Whatever that comes, I know. We'll ship Debian's next release when Debian is damn good and ready. And not before. And don't worry, you guys have been waiting there to steal all the code. It is in Red Hat Enterprise Linux and CentOS. If you have 7, it's already part of the distro. It's just a yum install Docker. If you have 6.5, it's part of it's an EPEL. It's in Fedora. It's been there for a while. I'm not sure I'll back. It's in Mint, which surprised me because it's the latest version of Mint. So they actually went upstream on it, which surprised the crap out of me. Keep in mind some distros can be quite old. Ubuntu is 14.04 is like 0.9. The current release is like 1.20. So you've got some drift there. You can always go to the upstream stuff, but keep in mind you want to do that before you install the built-in version because that will have stuff. One thing to keep in mind is once you go off the supported path, Ubuntu will wipe their hands at you. If you do have a support contract with them and stuff like that. And the same thing with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, all that kind of stuff. Red Hat Enterprise Linux is going to support version 1.0 for the next 10 years. They're not going to do a major version upgrade. Fortunately, Debian's testing will always be available with the latest and greatest version of it, so keep that in mind. It's a great keep them.
Yeah, program computer credit takes up Debian's testing.
Well,
all the testing loves you.
You might be stuck in like EPEL and iOS as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the EPL might have later versions, stuff like that. So one thing we're talking about is something called CoreOS. CoreOS, okay, a couple years ago, Ubuntu had something called Juice, J-E-O-S, which was just enough OS. The core idea behind Juice was, it's amazing how much of the stuff is shit that's already happened, for lack of a better term. But due to the fact that it's happening at the right time now, this time it's going to take off. It's kind of like, why hold is Linux successful and 386 BSD? Something for another day. So there was Juice from Ubuntu, designed to be just enough that you can run VMware on top of it and start partitioning up your hardware. Very nice, worked very well, nobody cared. Now there's something called CoreOS. And CoreOS is a very small OS. It doesn't even have package management. It just is. So it's like, it is pretty close. It's forked out. Slackware has package management. It doesn't have dependencies. It's forked off of CoreOS, which is in Chromebook. Why would that be forking a server OS? That's a fine question. But it has a couple. Chrome OS has a couple features that are really nice about it. One thing is when you take your Chromebook, you update it, it doesn't overwrite what you have. You have 2 partitions on your Chromebook, and what it does is it writes to the other one, and you reboot it, and then it comes back. And if it doesn't come back, you go back to the previous one, and you move on the rest of your life. They're doing the same thing with CoreOS. What they have is they have 2 copies of the OS, and whichever one isn't being used, one that gets upgraded, you reboot it. That's not that big a deal. What's a big deal is you have SED, which provides you a network-wide key value pair that allows you to fire many small machines. I can create 100 CoreOS boxes by going to Best Buy and cutting a check for a certain amount of money. Let's not say, yeah, 100, that seems like a lot. Let's say 5. I can take 5, put them all inside the CoreOS, register them all, have them all boot up, they'll have their own IP addresses, and then that would be enough of an OS to run Docker on top of. So I can then have Docker conf run, pull various components down based on the configuration settings. How I want to balance them, no problem, however I want to do it. How you create it is up to you, it's between you and CoreOS and whatever gods you worship. And that's where things get interesting. Because you have the key value pair, so you have a way to write information back and forth, and be seen by the whole network of machines. So if you have this capability, you can now fire up a whole bunch of stuff on this. And it's just Docker changed the way it works because it just lets you fire up a whole bunch of turnkey stuff on top if you want to, or whatever you want to. And it's going to be an OS. The problem with it is you're back to the point where you're accepting the fact that CoreOS knows better than anything else. And it's going to be a very tough paradigm shift for a lot of people to accept that I don't have control of this, that CoreOS does this, the Docker's on top of it. I don't know if it's going to be that huge in some respects, but it is very cool stuff. And it's going to be, it's still out there, it's competing, it's moving forward. We'll see how it goes. Clocker is another project. It uses Apache Grothe to allow you to intelligently control spinning up a cloud of Dockers. Yes? What's Apache Grothe? It's a project that allows you to intelligently spin up a... I looked into Clocker. Okay, I've never heard of it. Brooklyn is supposed to be some sort of negotiation type thing. I'm not sure what type it is. I believe it's in Java. What this lets you do is lets you control deploying your Docker instance to where you want to go. Yes?
Brooklyn is a framework for modeling, monitoring, and managing applications through autonomic blueprints.
Duh! That would have been my 10th guess. Like, so what you can do with this, you can deploy the Clocker, you can deploy your Docker instances to OpenStack, AWS, Eucalyptus, VMware's hybrid cloud, and others. So you can say, hey, I get a lot of traffic from China. I have an AWS instance out in Japan. Put this Docker instance out there. Do this, do that, all this stuff, automate all this stuff, so you can keep it down. Like I lost the AWS data center in Virginia. That's happened before. You can actually have a dynamically be smart enough to be able to do that. You won't get saved in transit transactions. It's not vMotion. It's more like a chef type solution where it can run stuff afterwards. Well, what it can do is you can start figuring out where you want to move stuff. You can actually theoretically, if you want to run machines during the day to handle traffic at your site, run them at night when it works better for you, or if your example being, all right, the example being, how many people use AWS? All right, AWS has this one thing that's very, very cool. You can actually bid on unused machines, virtual machines. So virtual machines not being used by anybody, and it's like a tiny or small or medium or large, and you say, I will give you 1 cent per hour on that, and no one else bids higher. You have that machine for an hour. So theoretically, you could have it fire up something through Docker, go out and do some scientific computing, so you get kicked off for an hour. Of course, you have to make sure you save all your data, all that kind of crap. But what it comes down to is you can now handle it. You can theoretically move your traffic to Amazon during the day, move it back home at night, anything you want to with that, and keep your stuff up. Of course, you have to use the plastic bits, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to handle everything, but it is amazing for what it could do, what it can add to. You can add layers of complexity that will break your mind open, which you may or may not be a good thing. But Clocker is another project that is out there. There's another project out there right now called LibSwarm. LibSwarm is part of Docker. It's created by the Docker guys, and it lets you start inspecting a whole network of machines so you can figure out what the heck Docker's doing. You can start handling the distribution and all that kind of stuff with it. Very cool. Some Docker gotchas, the networking. Still interesting where it's at right now. When you do the initial deployment of Docker container, you specify the ports. If you don't, you theoretically can't add them. There's supposed to be some way to do it. I have tried. Do you know how? Okay, I was hoping God did, because that would have made this all better. But it comes down to you really need to know what you're doing up front. And that requires a plan. You can do the stuff through the inspection and stuff like that, but you're still going to be always taking a little bit of a lump there. Another gotcha is old versions of Ubuntu. Yeah, I moved some of my machines to the upstream version. Docker fixed these issues. The problem with that is I didn't change the name from Docker.io to Docker. I did not link Docker to Docker.io. It broke some of my scripts, and unfortunately I lost the container. It's actually all my fault. I will say it's not Ubuntu's fault. It still hurts. Some more gotchas. There's no live migration yet. There's no partition checkpoint. There's no I/O rate limiting. There's limited quota support. It's not designed for badly behaving applications. It's designed for stuff that's going to behave well. This stuff you actually trust. One of the great things about VMware is I can run crap on it and it will run. I can choke it down so it will not destroy anything on the network. This is not that case. This is back to put it this, I don't know, in a way, this is almost like cooperative multitasking. Theoretically, it's more efficient than hard multitasking, but it's not good if you don't have well-behaved apps.
This is C groups based, though, right?
Yep.
Did you handle that with? Isn't that what C groups was designed to do?
Yeah.
It's got some of the capabilities, but it doesn't have I/O rate limiting stuff like that yet. That I'm aware of.
Normal C groups does. I mean, you can limit memory.
You can limit that stuff.
CPU usage to a certain.
You can give us a priority.
I thought C groups was past just be nice.
It's control groups.
Yeah, it's control. I know it still has some limitations on it. I could be wrong.
I don't know.
I got this off Wikipedia. So I will say I could very well be wrong.
Okay.
But there is a capability. I mean, it depends on which version you install. It does normally install Docker LXC in it. There is some capabilities of it, but it's still evolving. But it's stuff that's going to be available. You may be able to do it by going to the secret stuff at the lower.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe start bypassing Docker directly to the C.
Yeah, if you control at that level, I actually probably could. But Docker itself doesn't offer capability. Yeah, that whole time. Because the idea being, it's supposed to be dynamic. It's supposed to be something you expose the port. You're supposed to do it this way. So it changes it every freaking time. And if you don't expose the ports correctly when you first start running the container, it's going to change. And you'll never figure it out. So you'll never it will just keep. I won't remember your But, yeah, but I will still do that. Almost. Some other gotchas, what can break out of containers? That is, keep in mind, do not take, hey, I think I got a virus. I'll run inside a Docker container. Yeah, that could be very bad. Docker.io was the Docker package name. That's just wonder bar. Thank you, Ubuntu. Some tips for Docker. You can use Docker run the first. You can use the first couple characters for images. Docker run C5 instead of Docker run C5. The repos, amazingly useful. It'll get you started up and running. And most importantly, with Docker is don't be afraid to screw up as you will. The great thing about it is a container can be thrown away easily. You can create a new container. It's not like you're married to it. It's not like you went out and spent 4 days compiling Gen 2. You're going to be able to move all in your life. I didn't try open office. Excellent. So, am I using Docker? The answer is I'm using Docker right now. I work with a group on a project called Tacoma Universe. It's an update of a classic PBM project. Very cool thing. It actually has a really in-depth storyline and stuff too. We got to Facebook. You can see all the information about it. I don't know when we're going to be live. I don't want to say anything about that, but we are working towards it. It's very, very, very. It had a great storyline about. There was a whole bunch of side order life, prioritized. It's just cool stuff. But we're going to be bringing that back as a real online game. And right now we're going through the development process for it. And so one of the things we did was initially we were buying really cheap web servers, just VPS and various things. And between a combination of them getting hacked and being horrible performance, I mean comically bad performance running by SQL. Because if you get most of the hosting companies are designed for hosting static content. They're not designed for running MySQL. They're not designed for this. And we ended up eventually going to Linode, which, if you're looking for just a really nice one, Linode and DigitalOcean are just cool. Wow. They will make your life suck so much less.
I really like them. Mine done that.
Yes, DigitalOcean is also really good. And next thing I note is they have A, great documentation, and B, they support Docker. Thank you, Linode. So what we've done is we initially bought a bunch of small servers. What we've done now is we bought one nice test dev server, and it is freakishly fast. The solid state disk and stuff in it, it just runs stuff so fast. Sometimes you're like, let me run that one more time, make sure it's actually completed. It's cool, especially when you figure out what we're paying for it a month. But what we did is we installed Docker on it. We put turnkey Linux and a Postgres instance on there and some other components on there right now. And we're actually using that so we can create it. So what we'll be able to do is, theoretically, if we want to deploy this, we can either buy one big beefy server, put Docker on that, and then handle it that way. Or else we can buy a bunch of small servers and just do split the Docker IO, Docker test dev machine onto the real hardware. We got either option. So it gives us a great deal of flexibility. When we have a machine that's able to use all the memory and it's just so beautiful, it almost makes me want to cry compared to working with the BPS machines. It's horrible. So it really helps you out in that respect, and it's working great for us. Right now, we are not using a couple of things we should be using, like registry and stuff like that. We're still very early on in some of our stuff, but we're using it for the Postgres, for the Nginx, those components, and it's working great. We're happy. It works for us. I'm able to make my changes to it. Another guy's able to make his changes to it without screwing up my instance, so no one has to die. And it works. So we're still doing it and testing it out. I don't know if we'll do production. It's still that whole taking that next step. It's the same one that I had with running VMware production. Because for the longest time, there's a company in town called Housework. I don't know if anybody knows. They do Oracle Consulting and SQL Server Consulting. Great bunch of guys that know what they're doing. They are really sharp, and they were really big into VMware, put your Oracle for test, dev, production, all the same machine, license it once, and just do it this way. And I did not accept this. And now I understand that people do it. It works. It's supported. It's just something. It's a shift in my head. What?
It's a constant dance with Oracle.
Yes, that is a. Yeah. But that goes back to a whole Oracle licensing is its own whole thing. But how it works technically, it works great. So they figured that stuff out. They were like early on this stuff. I will get to the point where I accept Docker for production, but that's not there yet. But for test dev, it is freaking awesome. It is definitely worth it. You want to create it. You want to play around with MongoDB. Go out, pull a Docker, do a Docker pull of MongoDB instance, fire it up, go down. You want to do Redis, you want to do this, you want to do that. You don't want to screw with your whole life spending time reading how to forges on a disabled SE Linux, and how will we get this component working. You just want to do it. Example being, Docker registry. I started trying to figure out how to run that on my local machine. It's a bitch. I just don't know what scratch, right? So what I did was, I did a Docker pull registry. And now I'm running a registry locally, and it's working just fine. But how did that work? Because I was willing to trust Docker to handle it. So it's got a lot of big potential to it. It's really cool. Some references, docker.com or Docker homepage. TurnkeyLinux.com. These guys have great Docker images. They have documentation. All the stuff's laid out. It all works. It patches itself. It does. Just very nice stuff. StackOverflow.com. That's where you go for Docker questions. There's forums and stuff on Docker.com and stuff, but I found Stack Overflow would be a lot more useful. The Docker book. This is a really good book. DockerBook.com. They have a free chapter on it, which I actually downloaded to help me figure a couple things out with Docker. And I'm going to break down and buy the real book here. It's really good. How to for test article on Ubuntu Docker, which gives examples of pretty much all the commands and stuff, which is really nice. That's it for my presentation. So that's what Docker is. That's what Docker kind of does. It's designed to be stuff. Anybody got any questions? It should change things. Yes.
Okay. So one of the
I didn't say any answers. But
okay. So because I've been watching this and looking at this, and, okay. Some things I see really. Because I'm running a patch here in Nginx. Okay, that's that's fine. I see guys trying to do things like, I want to run Postgres for blocks. I want to run something that's going to take a whole bunch of disks, like a database.
Yeah.
I want to run something that, I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is things like soda stacks.
There are examples out there, people are doing it.
Successfully or living soda stacks?
Oh.
What did you say, Dave?
JBoss.
So, like, yeah,
JBoss Wildfly. I know Wildfly says they have a built-in Docker container.
I know people running Mongo, and if you run Mongo, I think so it shouldn't be too bad. Keep in mind, I mean, you are running this as an application underneath it for the secret stuff, so I mean, you are going to be, you should be able to get access to it. How you handle the file systems, you can actually mount like file systems through the Union stuff, so you can actually mount real BTRFS file systems, stuff like that. You shouldn't be paying the double write penalty. I have not done that. I've been running Postgres on my instance on at Linode, and I've gotten really good performance out of it. I've been writing mostly metadata and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I've not run anything with it.
There's probably not a lot of size.
Not yet. God willing, there will be. But no, it comes back to the question of your mileage may vary. Give it a shot. I mean, if you try it out, I would be interested to see how it goes. People are running some bigger stuff on it. I don't know a lot of people running it in production still, but people do run multi-gig stuff.
Instrumentation and monitoring of the containers. Do people load sensors or, like,
There's people are doing it through Chef and stuff like that to monitor it. There's also some Docker, primarily oriented utilities for like Seashore, and there's one of them I cannot remember off the top of my head, which does this sort of thing, which will actually give you the ability to see the entire network of your Docker instances, figure out what's running in each one, and how CPU utilization, something like that on it. Okay, sorry,
are these commercial solutions that are popping up, or are they still other open source?
They're open source solutions. Where's the heartbeat monitors? But there are some tools out there for it. One thing that doesn't exist, that doesn't even exist, and should be very cool, is if you use, there's a bunch of utilities for handling 2EMU images, like Qt, GUI, and stuff like that. It'll handle all that stuff. There's not a decent QTML, QML, Python type thing to actually handle your local instance. You can run Seashore on it to get control of it, but that's not part of it. You can write out like libswarm and stuff like that on it. What would be cool is if somebody writes something to give you the capability to fire Docker instances from the graphic command, from the GUI, just be able to create them, pull the right stuff, and all that kind of stuff. Just expose that. No one's done that yet that I've seen. But there are some people working on some stuff like that. But they're mostly doing it through the web servers. It's more or less a server. But a local version of for local systems would be very, very cool. Think about writing one actually. Last night. Anybody else got a question? So a year from now, when you're all using Docker, you're like, that's that Eric Grothe guy who's been wrong so many times. That's actually right.
All right, it takes one. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, gotta find somebody for next month. Everybody raise their hand. Who's going to present next month? Aaron is presenting.
What's going on with the whole Ubuntu phone, and Ubuntu TV, and Ubuntu everywhere stuff? I haven't heard anything about that in a long time.
Only had an Ubuntu person.
They dropped the Ubuntu Cloud.
I don't remember the dark side.
Oh yeah.
What's the dark side?
OS, Fedora, and
You don't need Ubuntu.
wow. I have one Ubuntu server right now. Because Word was all CentOS.
our buildings than an actual store. Yeah, but they have really nice video van drivers. We have video van stuff, Oracle's kernels, which is freaking amazing. That's, they use that for their next flight stuff. So,
Cool.
oh, but you can also run Docker on Windows.
Even running JDE.
Wow. There is also Docker for Windows and Docker for Mac OS X. They both use VirtualBox. So are you really?
Oh, so it's a test on a test.
Well, another thing that people are working on is something called Bakeries, which is a command automation process for VirtualBox. So they're providing that and buying out this other stuff, so you can theoretically start having it all work.
That's for automation projects.
It's
Like rolling out new virtual boxes?
Yes. Yes. Very efficient. Yes. Very, very profitable.
So it's like
Yes.
Puppet or Chef, but virtual box specific.
Actually, I've been playing with favorite games.
I just gave a talk on regex the other day. I can always do that again.
They're everywhere.
It only went an hour and a half.
Whoa!
So what'd you cover?
How much
I covered this much.
How much can you learn on regex in an hour and a half?
It's called regex chapter.
It's called the basics.
You talking about like Perl regular expressions or Bash?
Look forward to that on the OLUG list. Thank you for watching.
No, actually, I didn't.
Good night.
I remember when the